I like to start by saying I'm not a complicated person. Wake up, I try to do the right thing. Somehow life still treats me like I'm wandering around without adult supervision. And the other day, a very simple mistake, like a mistake so small you would think, surely nothing can go wrong from that. But my life doesn't work like that. In my life, one wrong move and suddenly the universe says, hey, let's turn this into an entire episode. So the day starts normal. I wake up feeling productive, which is already a red flag. Anytime I feel productive, that means I'm about to ruin something. You know what? Let me do something responsible. So I decide to run one tiny errand. One. Just one. That was the plan. And that's the first hook. Because if you ever hear me say, I'm just doing one thing, you should know that's the beginning of the end. The mistake, I grabbed the wrong keys. That's it, just the wrong keys. Should be nothing, should be a 2-second fix. But in my world, that's like pressing the self-destruct button on the whole day. Didn't even notice I had the wrong keys until I was standing confidently in front of my locked door, holding keys that belong to, I don't even know. Different era, a different universe. They were keys to Node I own. I turned one, and the door actually laughed. So now I'm standing outside like someone who just got kicked out of his own life. And this is where the second hook kicks in, because I'm trying to act calm, but I'm having a full conversation with myself. All right, Nate, you got this. Just figure it out. But every solution I come up with is somehow dumber than the last one. I tried calling my wife, but she answered the phone like she already knew something was wrong. She didn't even say hello. She just said my name like it was a warning. Nate, I told her, hey, funny story, I have the wrong keys. And she goes, how? How do you have the wrong keys to your own house? And I didn't have an answer. Because if I did, I wouldn't be in this situation. And I said, well, these keys were just sitting there. And she goes, because they're not our keys. At this point, I'm basically locked out of my life. I tried the classic move of jiggling the handle, like that's going to magically fix my intelligence level. I looked around like maybe someone else would have better ideas than me. Even tried to convince myself that maybe the door was wrong. Maybe I was right and the house should adjust. Eventually, my neighbor walks by and he's like, you locked out? And I said, no, I'm just practicing. Because if there's one thing about being an adult, it's that you lie to protect whatever dignity you have left. Finally, my wife gets home, opens the door in 1 second, just looks at me like she married a baby in a hoodie. And she's right. She is not wrong. But here's the thing, it's never the big stuff that gets me. It's always the simple things. The things normal adults can do without thinking. Those are the things that turn into full day events for me. That's how one tiny mistake, one wrong key, somehow managed to take over my entire day and become a whole Nate Bargatze story. As I walked inside, my wife said, next time, just don't touch anything until I get home. And honestly, that might be the best plan for everybody. When I say I woke up feeling responsible, I mean I opened my eyes with the kind of confidence that should have immediately been reported to someone. Because it never starts with a big event, it always starts with a feeling. And that morning, the very first thought in my mind was, today, I'm finally going to get my life together. That should have been the warning sign. Every time I think that somehow turns into a documentary about how unprepared I am to exist among normal adults. But there I was, feeling focused, energized, and ready, like a man who had absolutely no idea what was waiting for him. That's the first hook right there. The false confidence. You ever get that burst of motivation that feels so unfamiliar, you don't even trust it? You stand up like, who gave me this energy? Who signed off on this? I walked around the house like I was the CEO of something, straightening pillows, closing cabinet doors, doing the small things that make you feel responsible, even though they require no real talent. It's that temporary delusion where you convince yourself you're a fully functioning adult just because you plugged the charger you weren't using. Even grabbed a notebook, not because I needed to write anything, because holding a notebook makes you feel like your life has direction. I didn't write a word in it. Just held it like I was preparing for a TED Talk nobody invited me to. But the funniest part is how quickly that feeling makes you overestimate your abilities. You start believing you can do anything. Sure, run errands, easy. Solve world problems because you put on clean socks, absolutely. I'm walking around with this purpose like the day has chosen me for greatness, when really it's preparing to humble me in the most personal way. There's another hook hiding right there, the irony. The more confident I get, the more certain it becomes that something incredibly simple is going to take me down. So with all this newfound responsibility bursting out of me, I decide to run one small errand, just one. That's it. That is always the moment the day changes direction. One simple task, because in my head, that's how responsible adults operate. I have a plan, they follow the plan, and the plan works. Meanwhile, I have a plan, the plan is already planning its own escape. I grab my stuff with this dramatic purpose, like I'm starring in my own movie. I even stopped at the door and mentally congratulated myself for being so put together. And if I had paused one more second, I probably would have talked myself out of leaving the house entirely, which would have saved me. But that's not how my life goes. I walked out like a man who truly believed he was in control. That's the moment everything starts falling apart. Not later, not halfway through the day. Right there, at that exact second, when I decided to be responsible. Because the universe doesn't fear my chaos, it expects it. And it waits patiently for the moment I say, this is going to be a simple day. That's when everything quietly shifts into place for the disaster that's coming. The best part, I never see it. I'm too busy being proud of myself for waking up before the sun had a chance to judge me. The whole disaster began with something so small, so innocent, that it shouldn't have even qualified as a mistake. Grabbing the wrong keys is not the kind of thing that should derail an entire day. It's barely a misdemeanor in normal adult life. My world, that one tiny action is enough to set off a chain reaction that somehow ends with me questioning my identity. What makes it worse is that I grabbed those keys with confidence, real, unearned confidence. I picked them up like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. That's the hook right there, the false certainty. Anytime I act like I've got things under control, that's when the universe quietly steps back and says, all right, let's see where he goes with this. The keys were sitting right where they always are. The general area of places I think I put things. I don't have a real system. I just have surfaces. Whatever lands on those surfaces is assumed to be the thing I need. So I saw keys, they looked like keys I would probably use. I grabbed them without thinking. That's my process. No checking, no verifying, no asking questions. Just blind faith, blind, dangerous faith. And maybe that works for people who are naturally competent. But for me, That's like performing surgery using guesses. What really gets me is how proud I was. Put the keys in my pocket with this swagger, like I was making smart choices. And the entire time, the wrong keys are just rattling in my pocket like they're rehearsing for the moment they're going to embarrass me. There's another hook right there, the silent build-up. You ever carry an object that already knows it's about to ruin your day? My keys knew. They were excited. They were probably whispering to each other, "He has no idea. This is going to be incredible." The comedy of the mistake is that I didn't realize it at home, where fixing it would have been easy. I walked out the door with the confidence of a man who thinks he's making progress in life. The only person who can make a mistake and then take that mistake on a field trip carried those wrong keys all the way to the end of my driveway, all the way to the front door later, just ready to perform. When the moment came, when I stood there and inserted that key with the dramatic certainty of a man unlocking his destiny, nothing happened. Not even a polite attempt. The key didn't turn. It didn't resist. It didn't even acknowledge me. It just sat there like, "Buddy, I do not know this door." But the true hook, the moment everything flips, is when frustration kicks in. Because I didn't assume I was wrong. No, my first instinct was that the door was broken. That's how confident I was earlier. I thought, this house is falling apart. This lock doesn't work. Someone should fix this. And that someone is somehow never me. I jiggled the key like I was trying to pick a lock in a movie, ignoring the obvious fact that the key itself looked suspicious. You ever stare at something that doesn't belong to you and still think, "Yeah, that's mine"? That was me with the keys. The mistake wasn't just grabbing the wrong keys, it was committing to them, believing in them, putting trust in an object I didn't even recognize. And that's where the disaster truly begins. They're smart, because the moment I start believing something that isn't right, the rest of the day is already waiting to collapse on top of me. I just don't know it yet. When I finally reached the door and tried to use the wrong key, it wasn't just a normal failure, it felt personal. The moment that key went into the lock, the entire door seemed to pause, like it needed a second to process what kind of human it was dealing with. It didn't budge, didn't turn, didn't even pretend to cooperate. It just sat there in silent disappointment, the same look you get from a teacher who knows you didn't study. And that silence right there, that's the hook, because there's nothing funnier or more terrifying than a door quietly judging your life choices. I stood there frozen, thinking any second now it'll work, but deep down, the door already knew the truth. I had brought it the wrong key. This was about to become a whole situation. The worst part is how long it takes me to admit something simple. Instead of pulling the key out and checking it like a responsible adult, I doubled down. I tried turning it harder because in my brain, force fixes intelligence. I jiggled it, twisted it, even gave the door that gentle shove people give when they think they're helping. You ever shove a locked door lightly if politeness is going to change physics? That was me negotiating politely with an object that clearly had no interest in helping me. But the real comedy starts when my brain begins searching for excuses because I refuse to believe I'm the problem. My first thought was, the lock must be stuck because of course the house is wrong, not me, the house. Then I thought, maybe I'm holding the key at a weird angle, which doesn't make sense because I've been unlocking doors my entire life. But when embarrassment kicks in, logic leaves immediately. And there's another hook the spiral of denial. The more obvious the mistake becomes, the more creative my excuses get. I even started doing that thing where you pull the key out slightly and push it back in. Maybe there's a magical sweet spot only chosen people know about. I'm standing there like a locksmith who learned his trade through guesswork. And the door, completely unfazed. If doors could blink slowly, mine would have done it. Just this slow, disappointed blink like, buddy, this isn't even the right key family. And that's when frustration starts turning into panic, because it hits me. I might be locked out of my own life. The door is right in front of me, everything I own is behind it, and I'm standing there like a guest on my own property. So now I'm doing that awkward move where you look around, pretending nothing's wrong, even though absolutely everything is wrong. I checked the key again, and for the first time, I actually looked at it closely. And suddenly it hit me, I had never seen this key before in my life. Not once, not ever. It looked like it belonged to a barn, or a treasure chest, or a time machine. Anything except my house. But the funniest moment, the hook that really grabs the whole story, is that even after realizing the key wasn't mine, still tried it one more time. Because that's who I am as a person. I will try something again just in case the laws of reality decide to change for me specifically. Spoiler, they never do. Standing there, defeated by metal, wood, and logic, I finally accepted the truth. I wasn't dealing with a stubborn door or a broken lock. I was dealing with my own overconfidence from earlier in the morning, coming back for revenge. And this door, this silent, unbothered door, ended up being the perfect reminder that sometimes the world doesn't have to push back loudly. Sometimes all it takes is a simple moment of nothing happening to show you exactly how lost you are. When I finally reached the point where the door had fully rejected me and my confidence had dissolved like cotton candy in the rain, I knew I had to call my wife. There's a specific kind of fear that comes with calling your spouse to confess something stupid. It's not danger fear. It's, I already know I messed up, and now I have to say it out loud, fear. I pulled out my phone with the same hesitation you'd have if you were calling the bank to admit you clicked on a suspicious link. The moment the call connected, she didn't even say hello. She just said my name in that slow, disappointed tone that tells you she already knows something is wrong. They're smart. That's the hook. Because when someone starts with your name instead of a greeting, it means they're prepared for the worst. I said, hey, funny story, which is code for brace yourself. Anytime someone says, funny story, nothing good follows. But that's my strategy. If I label it funny early, I hope she reacts kindly. It never works. I told her, I think I grabbed the wrong keys, and there was silence. Not normal silence. This was the silence of someone processing the fact that they married a person who can lose a battle against a doorknob. She finally said, how? How do you grab the wrong keys to your own house? And that question hit me harder than the door did, because I truly didn't know. There wasn't a good reason. There wasn't even a bad reason. There was no reason at all. Grabbed keys because they were shiny and near me, that's it. That's the entire thought process. She asked me to describe the keys, and as I tried, I realized I had never seen them before in my life. Halfway through the explanation, even I stopped believing myself. I said, these don't look familiar. And she said, because they're not ours. Her tone had shifted from concerned to confused, like she was trying to figure out if I had accidentally wandered into a different dimension. That's another hook. The moment your spouse starts questioning your basic ability to interact with objects, then came the sigh. Not the normal sigh. This was the married sigh, the sigh that says, I love you. I don't understand how you've survived this long. She told me she was on her way home. But the way she said it carried the energy of someone who has accepted they will be handling adult responsibilities for the rest of their life. I could hear her gathering her things with that calm frustration that only comes from years of watching someone make avoidable mistakes. While I waited for her, I kept pacing around the porch. It's like I was trying to solve a mystery. Even held the wrong keys up to the sunlight, as if the sun would bless me with an explanation. I rehearsed my justification, even though I knew there wasn't one. I practiced saying, it's an easy mistake, but it didn't sound convincing even to me. The keychain felt heavier by the minute, like it carried all the weight of my poor decision making. When she finally pulled into the driveway, she didn't rush out of the car. She just stared at me through the window like she was mentally preparing a team meeting about my capabilities. She walked up, took one look at the keys in my hand, and said, these belong to the storage unit we canceled 2 years ago. I didn't ask how they resurfaced. I didn't ask why fate chose them. All I knew was that she had every right to question my life choices. She put her own key into the door, turned it effortlessly, and looked back at me with that expression that says, see, this is how humans do it. And in that moment, the only thing louder than the door open was the sound of my pride collapsing. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more humiliating, my neighbor appeared. There's always a moment in these stories where someone shows up and witnesses the absolute peak of your incompetence. This was mine. He walked by like nothing was happening, just enjoying the weather. And they're smart, and then stopped when he saw me standing there, keys in hand, staring at a door like it had personally offended me. That's the hook, the uninvited witness. There's a specific kind of dread that comes when you realize someone else is watching you fail at something you assumed was mundane. Tilted his head and asked, you locked out? And I had to think quickly. I couldn't just say yes. That would be admitting full failure in front of an audience. So I lied. I said, no, I practiced what exactly? I have no idea. But in my brain, it made perfect sense. If anyone asks, just pretend you're performing a skill demonstration. I jiggled the key a little, rotated it slowly, even gave the door a polite nudge, all while trying to maintain a sense of dignity. You ever try to act calm while the entire universe knows you're a mess? It's exhausting. And the more I faked composure, the more ridiculous I probably looked. That's another hook. Our natural instinct to cover embarrassment often multiplies it tenfold. Then he asked a follow-up question. These keys work, and I panicked. Of course they don't work. But I didn't want him to know that I was officially defeated by a household object. I said, well, not exactly, but it's complicated. That's the Nate moment right there. The attempt to sound competent while standing in front of someone as the embodiment of failure. Every word out of my mouth is carefully constructed to avoid admitting the obvious. I'm completely inept. At this point, he's watching closely, like he's evaluating my ability to adult in real time. And somehow, the pressure makes me act even worse. I try turning the key again, slower this time, as if slowing down the failure will somehow make it less obvious. Jiggle the handle lightly, rotate the key awkwardly, all while maintaining eye contact with the neighbor like this is a normal part of my morning routine. He doesn't leave, doesn't laugh, which makes it worse because his silent judgment is far more humiliating than ridicule could ever be. That's the hook, the quiet observer. Sometimes the worst audience is the one that doesn't react. Came the part that really solidified my defeat. I tried to explain what happened. I said, grabbed these keys earlier thinking they were mine, but apparently they're not. And he nodded as if he understood, but his face told a story that didn't match his words. I could read it clearly. You are hopeless. I know it. That's the moment where embarrassment reaches a new level because you're now accountable not just to yourself and your spouse, but to a neutral party who witnessed everything. Finally, he walked away slowly, leaving me alone again with the keys and the door. And I realized the cruel irony. The neighbor who walked by was probably expecting just a casual greeting, maybe a wave. Instead, became the unwilling spectator to the full spectacle of my life unraveling over metal and wood. And standing there, pretending nothing had gone wrong while knowing everything had, I couldn't help but think that this is exactly how stories like mine begin one small mistake, compounded by pride, compounded by audience, compounded by stubbornness, all spiraling into an experience you'll replay in your mind for days, laughing at yourself before anyone else does. By the time my wife arrived, the entire situation had reached what I can only describe as peak humiliation. She pulled up slowly, the car door opening with the kind of deliberate grace that immediately made me feel small, like I was standing in a courtroom waiting for the verdict. That's the hook, the anticipation. When she stepped out, she didn't rush or panic. She didn't even make a sound. She simply walked toward the door, glanced at me, and gave that look. You know, the one, part disbelief, part amusement, part how is this even legal? I was holding the wrong keys like a trophy of failure. She didn't need words to make it clear that I had once again proven myself incapable of even the simplest adult task. As she approached, I tried to act nonchalant. Maybe I was testing some new method of door security that required total confusion. But she wasn't fooled. She stopped a few feet away, took the keys from my hand without even touching them, and inserted her own key. That single motion, the effortless click of the lock turning, was a symphony of everything I had failed at that day. That's another hook, the silent demonstration of competence. One small action, and suddenly everything I thought mattered. All my pride, all my careful explanations evaporated instantly. I tried to speak, to offer some kind of justification, maybe a funny remark, something to soften the blow. But nothing came out. I opened my mouth. It was just a series of awkward noises that I hoped sounded casual. My wife, of course, didn't react to my attempt at humor. She didn't even need to. The situation spoke for itself. The door was open. My keys were useless. I was defeated. Standing there, I realized that the longer I tried to explain myself, the worse it got. And there's the hook again. Sometimes the longer you talk, the deeper the hole you dig. While she walked past me into the house, I noticed the way she carried herself, calm and unhurried, like someone who has seen this exact scene play out before, which, of course, she has. That's the comedic reality of marriage. Years of experience observing the absurdity you produce daily. She didn't need to say anything. I could tell she was mentally filing this under Nate's life lessons. Episode 432, every step she took across the threshold was a reminder that life continues around you, no matter how spectacularly you fail at minor tasks. I stood there, holding the wrong keys like they might still redeem themselves somehow. And for a moment, I thought maybe if I just stared at them long enough, the door would forgive me. It didn't. That's the hook. The absurd hope we humans cling to in situations where logic clearly dictates failure. You find yourself rationalizing the impossible. Maybe the key is shy. Maybe the lock is tired. Maybe the universe just wants to see if I'll keep trying. Finally, she turned and gave me that small, knowing smile, the one that says, "I love you, but I cannot explain how you exist in this world." And in that smile, I felt both the comfort and the humiliation at once. She walked into the house, leaving me with the keys that were never mine. Standing outside, thinking about how a single small mistake had escalated into a full day saga. Smart, and that's the ultimate Nate Bargatze moment, the realization that life's disasters are rarely dramatic. They're just small, simple mistakes amplified by pride, stubbornness, the perfect combination of timing and human observation. And that's how one tiny, completely harmless mistake, grabbing the wrong keys, managed to take over my entire day. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't life-threatening. It was just me being me. Standing outside a door I couldn't open, explaining to my wife, hiding from my neighbor, and realizing that no matter how responsible I try to be, life has a way of gently reminding me who's really in charge. And maybe that's the lesson here. Smart, sometimes the simplest mistakes make the best stories, and if you're lucky, you get to laugh at yourself before anyone else does. Because in my world, one small misstep isn't just a mistake, it's an entire episode worthy of a Nate Bargatze story.